Gentsch, for those of you who were in Monaco last year, is one of the representatives of the young generation, and of course your topic and your subject, customer relationship management, is also one of the newer ones. But more important in this context, of course, is that Professor Gentsch is also the chief analyst, the founder and the CEO of Business Intelligence Group, again, one of the partners that has a standout there. You have actually, together with probably quite a number of people in this room, founded something, and here we come to the Center of Excellence that Brian just mentioned, a social media excellent circle. And within that circle, you develop ideas, see where people are setting benchmarks in a positive way, and you forget about the negative ways. And of course, ladies and gentlemen, when you look at social media, an analysis of McKinsey recently talked about Germany, and I know Germany in some ways is behind usage and application, but they said only 70% of the big companies in Germany are really seeing social media as important, and only 10% of them actually think they are creating economic success by using social media. How to do it and how to make a success of it, Professor Peter Gentsch, and he can also need a clap and a sound and a proper walk up to stage.
Yeah, thanks, Connie, for the introduction. I guess it's going to be a tough job following Brian. So what I would like to do in the upcoming 30 minutes is to focus on how companies can incorporate social media in order to unleash the real value of social media. Because at the end of the day, it's about how can I increase sales? How can I increase customer satisfaction? So finally, we have to answer the question, how can social media contribute to the bottom line? In order to do that, I will come up with some best practices, and I would like to start with a really short introduction, then diving into the practices. Then I would like to introduce a process model that helps companies to develop social media capabilities in a very systematic way. And finally, I would like to sum it up and give you a short outlook. Okay, so let's get started. I would like to introduce the corporate social media management loop. Sounds quite complicated. It's pretty simple, to be honest. So it all begins with listening and monitoring to keep track on what's going on. Are there any mentions? Are they positive, negative? So it's a kind of data collection. It's a kind of data gathering. Once we analyze, or once we have the data, we have to analyze the data. So that could be very simple stats like counting the number of posts, but also going to more sophisticated analytics like what are the influencers? Are there any trends coming up? Are there any issues? So it's a huge variety of different ways you can analyze the data. So we have to put the big data into the smart data, into the right data. And it's also about the social CRM. Very interesting. How can we combine our CRM systems with the social media sphere? I will come to this point in more detail later. And of course, it's about big data. I think the most challenging part is how can we derive actions out of the analytics? I think you're all aware of the slogan, turning data into dollar. Actually, it's not that easy as it sounds. How can we act on the data? How can we carry out? How can we run campaigns? Very challenging part, actually. And finally, we have to close a loop, otherwise obviously it wouldn't be a loop. We have to measure the performance of our campaigns, our initiative. So pretty simple. It's about analyzing, listening, and acting. And even though that the knowledge that is derived out of social media, it's not limited to social media. You can also use it for different channels. You can use the insights for the call center guys. You can use it for email campaigns and so on. And even though that this loop implies a very structured, a very straightforward approach, social media is a terrific experimental environment where you can test campaigns, test and learn. So in the field of web controlling and performance marketing, it's common practice to do some A/B testing. I think you all know that. Why shouldn't we apply that idea to the social media sphere? So social media is an excellent test environment. Social media is another channel to approach a customer. And the most important thing, I guess, social media is a valuable source to profile your customer. And we heard it already, it's about the social graph. And I would like to do a little contest with you all guys. A couple of weeks ago, I was in New York at the Social Media Summit. And everything was about gamification and incentivation. So what drives really engagement? And today I would like to figure out whether it's working or not. So I have a small contest. You can win a terrific research study on social CRM, so it's definitely worth spending and attending. So there's a profile. Who of you guys know who is behind this profile? So it's a person born 1948, grew up in England, married in the second time, 2 children, successful in business, wealthy, spent their winter holidays in the Alps, like dogs. Anybody has an idea who could this be? Wow, Prince Charles. Congratulations, you got it. But there's another chance, guys, don't worry, I have another person. So this person, completely different, born 1948, grew up in England, seems to be quite similar. Some kind of copy and paste mistake, maybe? No, it's another person. Another chance for you guys. It's not Prince Charles? No? Any ideas? So we have Prince Charles and we have Ozzy Osbourne. You won't believe. So the most compelling definition of CRM is from Pepper and Rogers, saying treating different customers differently. But how the hell should I treat this type of people differently, because it seems to be quite similar? So what makes a difference? Of course, Facebook makes a difference. You won't believe they have a completely different social graph. They have different likes. They have a different peer group. So what I'm trying to say is social media is a very powerful tool to enrich data, to profile your customers, to really get deep insights of the customer, of the market. Okay, let's get serious again and dive into the examples. So I would like to come up with 3 different practices. So one refers to social media marketing. We're looking at Bosch. Then we have the social media service, which is related to DHL and Deutsche Post. And finally, we have this topic of social media issue and reputation management that refers to a couple of companies. Okay, let's start with the first one. It's about social media marketing. It's about recommender marketing, recommendation marketing, and all that stuff. And I will start to show you an example. So it's Bosch. I think you all know that. Global company. So it's about gardening tools, it's about drills, so all this do-it-yourself stuff. And I think we are all very much aware of the fact that the decision-making process, the buying-making process, is very much influenced by social media, right? So these engaged, empowered customers focus on earned content rather on paid content and brand content. So if you are looking for a new product, what you're usually doing, you type in Google and you look for this product. And you're not looking at the ads. You're looking what other people will recommend. So I think it's quite clear the crowd will give you some recommendations. And I think we all know that. And we all know that it's quite important to be recommended. But even the fact that we all know that this is important, the number of stars on Amazon, for example, the reviews, we all know that. Only few companies really take advantage of these marketing approach. And one of those companies is Bosch. And I know that's really tough stuff. Don't worry, it's not that complicated as it looks in the first glance. When it comes to social media monitoring, it's often about what is the share of buzz, what is the tonality. We also have the cloud score. But I think it does make sense to come up with these new artificial fancy currencies. We have well-established currencies in the marketing field. For example, the Net Promoter Score. I think most of you know the Net Promoter Score. It's the most widely known and accepted measurement for customer satisfaction, loyalty, and also churn, because you're not looking only at your promoters, you're also looking at your distractors. So they indicate you some likelihood of churn. So the Net Promoter Score is a very powerful tool to act on in the marketing field. Usually it's calculated in the market research twice a year. It's expensive, it's biased, and it's not real time. But based on social media data, you can calculate the Net Promoter in a real-time manner. And you can also compare your Net Promoter Score with that of your competitors. So it's a very actionable, run the business metric you can use. I think it's much better than just looking at the share of buzz, okay? Another KPI that should be interesting for the marketing field is the positive brand share. So how your brand is perceived in social media. Or the recommendation share. What is your piece of the overall recommendation cake? And finally, how your products are perceived in the market if you just look at the stars on Amazon. So what I'm trying to say, it's not about the number of posts. You have to come up with really actionable metrics. The good news is that the variables, the ingredients of that complicated formula are quite easy. At the end of the day, it's about the number of posts, the tonality, but you have to compile it in a smart way to get these compounded, actionable metrics. And these metrics are fed into a reporting scheme that provides you with a very detailed view. You can see for Germany, for the US, you can look at a very general level regarding the brand as a whole. You can look at certain product categories, and it can even break down to a single product. You have a very detailed view just based on social media data. No market research required, just using the social media as a data warehouse to get these kind of information. Some of you might say, okay, another report nobody's looking at. No. Because these kind of measurements are part of the marketing process at Bosch. There's no single KPI that has no action plan behind. So, for example, look at the recommendation share. Whether you are underperforming, overperforming, there has to be taken a certain action. So it's not some nice icing on the cake. It's really part of the marketing process. And above that, the marketing guys are paid for that. It's part of the objective scheme. It's part of the incentive scheme. So doing that, you can really ensure that social media KPIs are becoming part of your business. So they're integrated into the process. And of course, they have some fancy dashboards where you can slice and dice, you can drill down the data. I think you all know that. And I think some of you might say, okay, he wants to talk about social media marketing and all this analytical stuff. I know, social media marketing is very much about communication. This brings me to my next point. And this is the Bosch Solar Energy, which is more related to the business and business environment. And I guess it's hard to read, but somebody says, I just signed a contract, hope it was the right decision. This is a perfect opportunity to jump in and say, well, congratulations, it was definitely the right decision. Or another opportunity to jump in would be, welcome the 100,000 Facebook fan. Or another could be, when somebody checked in on Foursquare, just to welcome him, and hopefully you have some information that might fit in the location. What Dell usually does is when they have a new product, and usually they have a lot of users that give recommendations and appreciate that product, then they say, thanks for your excitement. Or simply saying, thank you for becoming a fan. So I think social media marketing is much more than having a piece of information, trying to repackage it and then spread it across the new channels like Google+, Twitter, and Facebook. It's more about how can we engage in a very personal way with the audience. For example, in this way. The question is, do we need intelligence behind? Because this is more or less a communication process. Yes. Why? For example, at Dell, you have 25,000 conversations a day. So it's nearly impossible to keep track on what's going on. So you need intelligence behind that helps you to say, this could be a window for communication. This could be an event you should jump in. And if you have 10 channels on Facebook, you have 5 channels on Twitter, you have 10 channels on Google+, whatever, it's really hard to keep track on what's going on. So you need intelligence that provides you with information that might be useful for the communication process. So that brings me to the next point. So Karl-Heinz mentioned marketing is the new service, right? We could also do it the other way around. Perhaps services in the marketing. So I think we have to discuss this in more detail. So it's about social service. And I would like to refer to the example of DHL, Deutsche Post. And here you see a slide outlining the corporate social media management approach at DHL. So they have basically three pillars. We have the governance layer, we have the intelligence layer, and we have the engagement layer. And again, it's all about to listen, to act, to analyze. And now I would like to focus on the engagement level in the field of social service. They started off, usually companies doing that with this kind of social media monitoring, trying to keep track of what's going on. Are there any issues? What is the peak? What's beyond? And all that stuff. Interestingly enough, it turned out that there are also a lot of questions nobody was answering. For example, what the hell should I use a certain service? Why is that expensive? Can you explain the privacy in terms and conditions and whatever? But nobody was answering, actually. So the idea was, okay, let's capture the inquiries, let's capture the complaints, and just route them to the social media agent that he can directly engage with him. And you will see it in the next slide. It's similar to an Outlook email inbox, you know, but not emails are coming in, so posts are coming in, tweets are coming in. And the agent also get a lot of additional information. Is it an influencer? What is the tonality? What is the relevance of the source the post is coming from? And the agent can immediately decide whether to engage or not. In this case, unfortunately, it wasn't good news. There was an influencer that is going to cancel the service. And the agent directly jumps in and say, oh, what a pity. Why are you trying, or why are you not interested in our product? Why won't you cancel? So they encourage the audience to engage, to enter a conversation. The feedback of this was really terrific. You can look at Facebook, you can look at Twitter, because nobody expected from a large company like DHL and Deutsche Post that they could react that quickly, that smart. From my point of view, in 2 or 3 years, that becomes a commodity. Nobody gets excited when you answer a post on Facebook or Twitter. Usually nobody gets excited if you call in a call center and somebody pick up the call. So the phone. So I think it's changing. When it comes to service, it also comes to complaints, right? And also some shitstorms are happening, of course. And there's one, it's similar to the American Brakes guitar. I think you all know that shitstorm. It's quite similar at DHL. There was a deliverer which actually treated the packages not that nicely and threw it in the van. Unfortunately, a customer saw that, made a video and put it on YouTube. You might imagine that some viral effects occurred, and I will provide you with the post. So I work for DHL, and but it's not. But it's your job as a customer to make sure your box is adequately packed. DHL delivers thousands of packages at each warehouse daily. So we are not going to pamper each box like a small baby and sing lullabies. We simply deliver the shit on time. I think the deliverer should go through the communication guidelines once again. And Brian, you mentioned some co-creation and open innovation. Maybe you can use it. It's a new marketing slogan for DHL. I think it's quite compelling. Simply deliver the shit on time. But once again, things happen, so you have to be aware of that. And definitely you need some kind of social media guidelines. So let's come back to the serious intelligence side. Of course, we can measure everything. Of course, there are huge varieties of different KPIs, but don't worry. I just want to focus on the main important KPIs we use in the field of customer service. What can you do in the social sphere? You can count the number of inquiries coming in. You can also report the number of inquiries answered, hopefully. The same to the complaints. So quite clear, this is very much related to customer service. But each complaint is also an opportunity for sales. So number of leads generated out of answered inquiries. The same to the complaints, so it also refers to sales. And you know, Google is capturing everything. Maybe you type in Google DHL and you will find a complaint under the top 5 results on the first page. Hopefully also in combination with a resolution. So it also refers to marketing because you get some exposure on Google if you do this kind of things. What I'm trying to say, that's not that clear-cutting dividing line between sales service, and marketing. It's changing. And finally, and unfortunately, most of the social media projects began with a shitstorm. Companies are concerned about flash mobs, shitstorms, and all that stuff. I'm not talking about shitstorms in a very detailed way. What I'm trying to say is, how can we manage a shitstorm? How can we prevent a shitstorm? Are there any KPIs that help us to incorporate shitstorm management into the organization? And I think you all know that there are a huge variety of different shitstorms. It all begins with the kryptonite example, then American Breaks guitar, the Nestle case, and so on. I don't want to dive in that detail. By the way, if you think of the term shitstorm, it's actually a nasty one, isn't it? So, okay. But we did some research on the field of shitstorm analysis. And this is usually the curve you have. So usually a shitstorm begins in the long tail. A blogger puts a video on its blog, for example. And then you have that tipping point. Do you know the tipping point? This is that magic moment when a post crosses a certain threshold and begins to spread across the internet like a wildfire. Usually, Twitter and Facebook accelerate these phenomena. And then you have the spillover effects to the online press and also to the traditional press. Most of the research which is done in this field are some kind of ex-post analysis. So they try to explain what's happened in the past, but that's not very helpful. Because in the beginning, you have some room for action. Once a shitstorm is going on, the room for action is decreasing. So it's important to get some information, some early warning systems, in order to prevent a potential shitstorm. And so what we did is we looked at the different shitstorms and put it in a framework. So we looked at all the shitstorms, trying to find out patterns. And we put it in that measurement framework. So you see the number of storm days, the number of peak days, and so on. And then we applied some data mining technique in order to find out, are there any patterns that reveal an early warning indicator? And that's good news. We could derive an early warning indicator. Of course, it goes only to a certain point. With a certain likelihood, you can predict this peak is most likely to become a shitstorm or not. So it's very important to manage a shitstorm that you get this information at a very early stage, right? Okay, this is the intelligence layer, providing powerful, actionable insights. Once again, we also need the governance layer. So we have a process behind. So you can see this is an issue management process, how to handle a shitstorm. For example, a post is coming in, crossing a certain threshold. Okay, then we need that kind of 4I principle, who is in charge of, who has to react in some way. So there's a process behind. So once again, you need to have some intelligence and you need to have some processes, some organizational stuff behind in order to unlock the true value of social media. So there are many more best practices in the field of social media marketing, of course, but I guess we will run out of time. So I think now the question comes up, how can we tie up all these loose ends? How can we put it in a comprehensive framework and not just looking at distinctive initiatives like running a campaign on Facebook? And the good news is that there is a process model we developed. And now I would like to introduce that kind of process model that helps you to develop social media in a very, very structured way. It's a kind of a joint development. So a lot of companies join these development and give you some background information. This is a social media excellence forum, which I set up 2 years ago. And you see a lot of companies are joining. And it's not technology driven. It's not vendor driven. The trigger point was quite simple. On the one side, you have these blinking lights. That's an energetic, dynamic social media. On the other hand, you have these well-established, structured, large companies. And the question is, how can we bridge the gap between the social media and the governance structure? And sometimes I got the impression that social media is emerging much faster than the ability of companies to adopt to that development. So that was the basic idea of our Social Media Excellence Forum, to come up with solutions. How can we manage the digital transformation process? So it's not some theoretical stuff. It really comes out of these companies. Okay. And the good news, you can all check this model. It's free available, so I will just guide you through that model, and maybe it's interesting for you. So we have 6 building blocks. I guess it's hard to read. It's about strategy, it's about organization, it's about execution, it's about monitoring, it's about analytics, and it's about interaction. So we have these 3 building blocks. And of course, we have different level of maturity. It starts with Explorer. So Explorer means this is quite a hands-on approach. Then the question is, how can we come to the next level of maturity, the optimizer? The next question would be, how can we enter the next phase of the social media maturity model? That would be the enabler. And the finishing touch, that's a champion. That's when social media becomes really critical for your business. So the good news is, if you move from the left to the right side, you can realize true business value. The flip side of the coin, you also have to have the budget beyond. In the beginning, it's much more tactical. Then it's becoming more and more strategic. You usually start reactive, going to active, going to be interactive, and hopefully to be adaptive in real time. This model also helps you to integrate the internal and external perspective, how to combine the internal external perspective to get this kind of integrated business. And as I told at the beginning, it's also about how can social media contribute to the bottom line. So at the end of the day, it's how can we make money with that. So this is a process model that helps you to develop and establish social media in your organization in a very structured way. So, and if you have some time, I would ask you to go through a questionnaire, which is available in English, which is available in German. And if you go through that questionnaire, this model will provide you frankly and honestly your current position. And this is an excellent starting point to see what is the room for improvement, what are the windows of opportunity. So maybe you're a beginner in the field of strategy, but you're also an optimizer in another field. So it's quite a good starting point to develop such a social media strategy. And I think the most interesting part of that is you can compare your performance, your assessment, with that of your competitors. So what you could do is, of the y-axis, you see the different level of maturity. Okay, that comes out of the questionnaire. Maybe you're just an explorer. And then you can also measure the pressure of social media, the opportunity of social media for your business. This can be done by social media monitoring. And then we have to answer the question whether this is balanced or not. So where's your industry? Utility, retail, insurance, automotive, computer. The question is, for example, if you are a company in a quite traditional industry, so that's not much pressure. So I think then it doesn't make sense to have a high level of maturity, right? So it should be balanced. So once again, I think it's a good starting point to figure out what is your current position compared to that of your competitors. Finally, my last slide. You will find a very detailed summary in the handout later. So I just would like to leave you with one last slide. And there's one question that remains to be clarified, to be honest. And it's about data privacy. We also covered that several times. And I have a nice last slide for you guys. So I think it's hard to read. I think you know this guy. It's not up here. Ah, no, here we go. That's good news. Do you know him? I guess so. So I give private information on corporations to you for free, and now I'm the villain. There's another guy you might know, Mark Zuckerberg. So I give you private information to corporations for money, and I'm Man of the Year. So as you can see, it depends on the perspective. But the good news is there is a way to manage social media in a privacy-compliant way. And we will have a talk tomorrow of Ralf Kreutzer, and he will exactly address the problem of data issues and data privacy in the field of social media management. But the good news, there is a solution. Don't worry. Thank you very much for your attention. So I would be happy to answer any of your questions right now, but I'm not sure if you're whether more hungry for lunch or more hungry for knowledge, so it's up to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.